All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Jazari Qual Show. We have an exciting live stream for you guys all here today. Initially, I wasn't going to do this, but decided to put something together to kind of wind down the 2024 presidential election and to kind of have some discussions and discourse about some of the key issues and how things are shaping up to play out. So, today we're going to be diving into a lot of the pressing topics shaping our country, our politics, and our future. And so, from election drama to the battle of democracy, the stakes cannot be higher with this election cycle coming to an end. Here to break it all down for you, but I am not alone. So, I have two of my friends, Trevor Riley and Tommy Blanton. Going to have them introduce themselves here in a second. Mel was supposed to come on, but she wasn't able to make it. So, hopefully, we can get her in the future. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Feel free to give this stream a be sure to give this stream a like and a share. And engage in the comments in real time. This is the Jazari Qual Show. Trevor, you're up first.
Howdy, I'm Trevor Riley. I'm the chair of the Lancaster County Libertarian Party, and I've been a Libertarian since 2015 when I got out of the Marine Corps. So kind of got head first in policy because I heard that we were going to be getting out of Afghanistan after 2013, and turns out it took a little while, but can't wait to get into all the issues. Thank you very much for hosting us, Jazari.
Of course, thank you so much for coming on. I think the last time I had you on a stream was in 2021.
I believe you're right. Yeah, I believe that was during the city council run.
During the city council run. All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
Of course.
I texted you guys like Friday afternoon. So thank you for making the time to come on. Tommy, you are up next.
Hey, how's it going? I just want to apologize for my lo-fi setup here. I just wasn't very good with time management today. But my name's Tommy. I'm more or less here in a personal capacity, just an overall civics nerd. But I also run an organization that focuses on voter education, nonpartisan voter education. It's called Vote Wise Nebraska. That's kind of my passion project right now. But I also like all things politics without too much of the aggression. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you guys so much for coming on. So I sent you guys kind of a list of just general topics that I wanted to talk about and kind of get your guys' feedback and opinions on, and just kind of your overall perspective to kind of just break down how this election cycle has been going. I love election years. It's the most exciting thing for me. Election night specifically is like the Super Bowl in my house. So love watching it all. Kind of just to kind of kick it off, Tommy, share like what your thoughts are on just how the election cycle has kind of been for you.
It's been a huge question mark. I mean, we're seeing this like phenomenon in polling where suddenly a ton of like conservative aligned pollsters are coming in and just kind of flooding the zone with polls after polls that are supposed to be a little more favorable to conservatives. So like I can't even, look at polls reliably and think, look at the aggregators and think, oh, where is this going? Where is this headed? So like I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm very lost. My head is spinning. Every election, it just seems like it's getting more anxiety ridden. So, I mean, I can talk about a few specific things, but overall, I have no idea what's going to happen. I barely know what's going on. It feels like, but that's where I'm at when it comes to this election.
Trevor?
Well, I would say that it's not nearly as hopeless as how it feels, but it's a little bit of a contradiction, because I think that no matter who wins the election, I think the American people definitely lost. Between the Republicans and the Democrats both having some issues with their primaries, this has actually been one of the first campaign seasons where I've really taken a back seat since the 2016 Gary Johnson campaign and the 2020 Joe Jorgensen campaign with the Libertarian Party. But I'm still voting Libertarian, really just because I believe that, Libertarian principles are probably one of the best things that can fix what's going wrong with Congress and what's going wrong with the presidency. And then even here in the legislature, there's a lot of Libertarian policies that I think would be beneficial to us. So really, that's just like my kind of torch, is being focused on policy. I haven't really looked too much at the polls, but definitely talking to people on an individual basis and finding out what they really care the most about and trying to tether that to some policy issue that I think that they should really carry forward as something they can propose to either conservative or Democrat. So long as that gets across the line, we can make Nebraska or the United States a better place.
Can you share a little bit about the policies you're talking about?
Well, yeah, the most recent one is actually the Defend the Guard, which is something that would be here in Nebraska legislature, which is basically just says that the United States military has been abroad in multiple countries, acting just off the AUMF, which is the authorization for use of military force. It's what initially got us to go into Afghanistan and then Iraq and Libya and a couple other places in the Middle East. But that's basically the U.S. foreign policy. Now, the Defend the Guard Act says we've been doing this for so long, we should do something to make sure that we don't send the National Guard somewhere, the Nebraska National Guard, unless that actually benefits our interests. And so this would require a formal declaration of war from Congress in order to deploy the Nebraska National Guard. And that basically perks people's ears up, because then they can look and you can point them to all the places and really bad military policy that the United States has been engaged in. And so focusing on local issues, getting your senator contacted about it, it's to be something that everybody can rally around about. And I actually spent some time this weekend up in Omaha with Nebraskans for Peace, talking to him about it to try to see, who's interested in maybe coming out and testify if we can get a legislator to pick it up.
Gotcha. Tommy, in terms of kind of just whoever comes out on top, I know that in election cycles, most of the time people say we're choosing the lesser of two evils. Does this truly feel like choosing the lesser of two evils in a situation like this?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know where I come from, and not to me, it's not the lesser of two evils, just because one is like so bad on the social policies that I really care about. Um, am I going to the polls just doing backflips or anything like that? No, not really, because um, even if my preferred candidate wins, there's still issues with like campaign finance and how the parties are pretty much really dependent on like a lot of money from certain groups and special interests and stuff like that. But when it comes to like me being young, I'm thinking a lot about social policies this cycle, and I'm thinking like, nah. There's a clear evil, and there's a clear not so great, but still way better than the other ones. So I don't feel like it's a lesser of two evils. I think there's just like one really big evil, and then the other one could be better, but I just don't think it's one of those elections this time around.
Well, I'd friendly, as a friendly pushback, I think, plenty of people were told that the same thing that 4 years ago, and then it was 4 years before that. I think that, really, they're both pretty bad. I think that the worst thing that you can do is endorse the system that supports two very terrible candidates. And so I think that, kids who are looking, millennials, and I mean, millennials at the head end are like 43. So if you're 43 and still kind of scratching your head, read a couple more books. But hey, appreciate you listening. But for the young kids who are like just now entering the workforce, the Zoomers basically, who are just now turning 23, 22, I think that they need to realize that, yeah, they actually do have some weight with their votes. Even millennials, we're like 71 million people. That's about a third of the voting population. I think that in order to get better options, you have to show that you will show up to the polls just to hold up your middle finger. And that's part of the reason I'm voting for Chase Oliver. I know he's not going to win. I don't necessarily like all the way that he's presented libertarian values, but I know that he's got the policies true to his heart. And I think that he would carry a lot of those across the finish line. Even so, looking at Jill Stein, if really you're caring about environmental policy, I'd say that voting your conscience is probably more important. I think there's never been a more important election to oppose the duopoly. I think that's what this election's about.
So what about people who say they're undecided? After the debate performances, how they do like the panel discussions of people who are like, giving their opinion on who they're voting for if they have their mind made up. And people still have not made up their mind about that. You know what I mean? Like we're at the final stretch, like this is like the finish line is right there. And that kind of can be worrisome, because oftentimes we hear it's the swing states that decide the election. And when you have a whole bunch of people who say they're still undecided.
It's kind of crazy. It's kind of mind blowing. I mean, we're 2 weeks away, but there are going to be people who are going to be driving to the polls, and whatever happens to be important on their mind, that's the way they're going to vote. To me, I mean, my mind was made up a long time ago. Yeah, I mean, just to make a little light of it, like in 2016, I felt like that cycle really was not fun at all, even though I voted for the Democratic candidate. But I mean, I was actually pretty drunk that night going into the polls because it just was so bleak that night. And just to touch on what was just said, like I don't want to endorse this system. Yeah, it's not a great one, and I'm really a reform minded person, and I would love to be able to see like third parties be able to be more competitive, because I think that would just in turn, make the major parties even better and actually give us some choices and stuff like that. So I mean, I focus more on reforms these days. So I mean, I think the system would be a lot better if we focused on things like, I don't think ranked choice voting is the perfect solution, but it's way better than first past the post. So you can actually see some like lower parties get in there and make the system better. But when it comes to like undecided voters, there's very few of them right now, but they do exist. I don't understand them. I wish I could know what is like making them, to that last day. But I've run into voters who are just like, yeah, whatever is on my mind as I'm driving to the polls, that's what's gonna impact my decision.
Well, and Tommy, I like that you said that because there are independent voters are hard to pin down. Being a libertarian and kind of finding out different philosophies. Being a Democrat and independent. Even conservatives had their own Tea Party, which kind of broke off from the original faction of like moderate Republicans. And I think that independents are so interesting because I've had a lot of people who know me as kind of like a political minded person approach me asking about RFK. And as somebody who like pays attention to a lot of issues that are reported by the mainstream press every single day, having somebody who isn't politically minded approach me about a political candidate who got on their radar, I think that's the hardest thing to understand, is that you had candidates coming out of the woodwork this time, mainly with RFK, and I unfortunately I can't remember his name, but there was one soul brave enough to challenge Joe Biden in the primaries, and actually made it on the ballot in a couple places.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I can't. The poor
Dean
fella,
Phillips.
He was from Minnesota, right?
Dean
I believe
Phillips.
he was
Dean Phillips. He was a
Dean Phillips.
congressman.
That's it. That's it. Congressman Dean Phillips. That's correct. He did his best, and I think that people who do that are commendable, and they're obviously speaking out to those independents who do feel politically left behind. And to people who do still feel confused, I really don't fault them. I was making that joke earlier, but like times change, people change, and most importantly, the government has just gotten bigger. And so that's why people feel more and more conflicted, because I think as they realize the government controls more and more of their lives and has all these other implications about how they vote, that does start to almost leave them lost with no idea of what to do, because there's so much they have to know to make an informed decision.
Yeah, some of the key, just to kind of talk about independent candidates, because there is an independent candidate that I've really been interested in lately. I mean, at the national level, yes, it's, I would say, pretty hard to compete as an independent or third party candidate. At the local level, not so much. Dan Osborne, which has been a pretty interesting candidate to follow. I met him back in 2021. Yeah, when he was doing the Kellogg strike. Mel, who was supposed to come on, she actually wrote the story for the Real News Network, and I did the photos for that story. At the time, he's the union president of Kellogg's and was kind of just leading the strike and things like that. But he has become a pretty interesting challenger to Deb Fischer, a 12-year GOP incumbent in the state, that has led to, and I even have this of him, that has led to pretty much national GOP PACs funneling money into Nebraska, which is a red state, which traditionally they wouldn't have to do. What are your guys' thoughts on this guy? I know Chami's thoughts, but Trevor, I would like for you to go first.
Yeah, so I did get the chance to meet him. He actually came out to the Libertarian State Convention back in, what was it, February? And March, early March. And he does seem to have some good ideas. He definitely seems to be thoroughly independent. If I had an hour to sit down and comb through all his thoughts and plans for what he would do up in Congress, I think that would be awesome. But right now, he's kind of running the election. I think that I haven't really gotten down to some of the roots of like what his guiding star is, and he's made a lot of comments that pushes me to like him, but I think that him not showing his full hand is also, it doesn't really get my full support, but I think he's a likable guy, absolutely. I can see myself voting for him. And right now I'm leaning towards it.
I actually reached out to him to see if he would come on, but.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome. That'd be great. I did spoke with him. He has some good ideas. I was able to talk with him about hemp because that's one of my pet issues in Congress. It's all cannabis, but yeah, he showed he could listen, and I like that.
Sure. Go ahead, Tommy.
Yeah, I mean, so I wouldn't take any personal that he didn't get back to you. I mean, his staff can be quite sporadic. For our voter guide, we had to reach out to them several times, and I had to go into their office twice in person, saying, "Hey, I sent you some emails, phone calls, and stuff like that." And I just kind of feel like their staff. I know for a fact they're not from Nebraska, and I mean, I watched them like set an American flag down on the ground during the Seward parade, the 4th of July parade. And, everybody was like, what's going on there? Dan Osborne ran over to pick those flags up and all that. So, I mean, I wouldn't feel so bad that they didn't get it. I mean, I'm sure if he actually knew about being on stuff like that, he would totally go for it. As far as whether I support him or not, I mean, I voted for him. Yeah. But I think there's a little bit of he does some cheesy stuff, like he's got the hot rods and the guitar shredding and stuff like that, and I just feel like he's kind of just overdoing it. Obviously, he picked red to be his primary color. I think he's kind of trying to buy into this. Oh, I might show people that I'm somewhat of a conservative or something like that. The one thing that I do take issue with is he's talking this big talk about billionaires controlling Congress and stuff like that, and they totally do. But if he's elected to the U.S. Senate, he's gonna have to figure out how to get a lot of money for reelection, and because there's no policies there to he hasn't talked anything about reforming campaign finance. I mean, I expect him, if he gets elected, to have to just pretty much come to terms with the fact that he's going to have to become friends with a billionaire, because you need a lot of money to run for Senate. It doesn't matter what state you're in. So it's like, I'm voting for him, but I'm not buying everything he's trying to sell. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I was listening to an interview that he did. By the way, I'm not salty that he didn't come on. I
Yeah.
understand that, running a statewide campaign is not an easy thing. And, 5:30 on a Sunday.
Well,
Yeah.
he's real approachable. I'm just saying, I think that your barrier was his staff.
Oh yeah. No,
And
yeah, I rode in his I think it was a Ford Explorer when he took us around the picket line to like when we were reporting on that story. But no, he was super kind when I spoke to him and met him and everything. Um he did an interview where he talked about where they asked him, um one of these, primetime shows, news shows, about what he would do to get legislation passed. Like, who would he caucus with? Would he caucus with the Republicans or the Democrats? And he wants to continue the independent spirit all the way while he's in the Senate, trying to form some type of independent committee. But then the thought of that is kind of like, how long would it take to build that up? Because there are independents in Senate, most famously, Bernie Sanders, but he caucuses with the Democrats. But I mean, on that side of things, I'm not exactly sure how he plans on, getting some of the things passed that he wants to or advocating for, but to build up that whole independent Senate caucus would take time. And like you said, he would have to spend some time there to be able to do so. But yeah, I think that's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out. I haven't checked the latest polling on where he is with Fisher. I think I checked several days ago, but I don't know if there's a new one that had come out. But yeah, super interested to see how that shakes out. You mentioned campaign finances and kind of just the amount of money that you need to run for the Senate. Kamala Harris just crossed over $1 billion raised within 3 month cycle. I know what your thoughts are on campaign finance, Tommy, but I do not know your thoughts at all on that, Trevor.
Well, my thoughts are it becomes a lot easier to get money out of politics when politics yields a lot less power. So that I think the general solution in the libertarian view, and I mean I shouldn't speak for all libertarians because we're very hyper individualistic, but I imagine that if there was less power concentrated in government, there's a lot less influence. There's a lot less need for corporations or these special interests in order to put money into politics. And I think that I mean the money's always going to come from somewhere. Whether you look at Deb Fisher or Dan Osborne getting billions or millions, whoever the donations are coming from, it's questionable if, yeah, there's a lot of outside interest, but that's why we have reporting laws. And I think that those laws should be followed. I think that we should work to get dark money out of politics. But again, that's also those incentives are there because there's so much power with politics. So trying to set up these barriers to reducing influence, I absolutely don't want foreign influence in American politics, but I think that the real solution is just having the government do less.
Tommy?
Should I step in? I don't know. I
Yeah.
mean, I've been trying to like really think about reforms in voter education. So it's been a long time since I've been versed in trying to like counter what somebody says. So forgive my
No, it's all good.
rustiness, but
I'm trying not to come in too strong opinioned.
yeah, no, I mean, I love my libertarians. I mean, they were the nicest ones that I reached out to when it came to the political parties. They were the nicest ones that worked with us. They were very enthusiastic and all that. And I mean, Republicans had a very strange submission, and the Democrats, you know, they're Democrats and deadlines is kind of a phrase in their party because, you know, they don't do so well when it comes to submissions. Like they got their submission in 45 minutes of the deadline. So,
Oh boy.
but I mean, yeah, I love my libertarians. I'm not trying to blow smoke there. I really do. But I mean, when it comes to like power, it's just like, haven't really thought about this in a long time, but sure. I mean, I do think in many respects the government should have power over an individual, but at the same time, if in other places that they become less powerful, you know, I mean, I think it'd be easy for private industry to like take over, you know. So, you know, I'm not really more focused on that, but if we're going to keep the system the way it is when it comes to campaign finance reform, for sure, we got to figure out what to do about dark money. It's kind of hard with the Supreme Court right now and some of the campaign finance like opinions that they've released in the last decade or so. It's not just Citizens United, but it's actually a lot of decisions. But when it comes to campaign finance reform, like here in Nebraska, for instance, for state races, we don't have any kind of limitations. It's you know, we're one of the few states where you can spend as much as you want on a candidate, no limits. And I feel like there's only a handful of states like that. But I mean, bottom line is, you know, if you're wanting something out of your representative, but their main bankroller wants something else, I mean, they're going to lean towards the green. You know what I'm saying? Like, you need money to run, and if you're not willing to do what it takes to get money, somebody else is. It's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't system. And I'd like to see defense and offensive reforms when it comes to money. But that's kind of the biggest problem, because it's just like politicians they run on incentive just like anybody else. And if the incentive is to do what your funder says to do, you're going to do that, you know?
If I can also jump in, I would just say that, you know, if there's a fear that private industry will take over your life just because the government's not there to regulate something, I would argue that private industry already has. You know, the Affordable Care Act was largely written by medical companies who wanted to still be able to sell their products. And so that's the result, is that we have less competition. So I think that competition does help drive away some of that influence, because if you have to waste your money on government capture or regulation capture by funding a politician in order to do it, I think that takes away from the actual competition that we can get with, like, you know, say the medical industry. You have intellectual property protections that actually keeps insulin from being a lot cheaper and easier to produce. And I think that, again, it goes towards the government. If you're bankrolling a politician who wants to keep those medical protections in place, yeah, we absolutely will. We'll call your lobbyists when we actually start writing the bill. So that way we know what you guys don't want in there. Or if you have to tweak some language for this next farm bill, we'll make sure to call up our ag industry friends, rather than just having to worry about what other farmer co-ops are going to do, because they're actually worried about mandating certain levels of pesticide to be applied. Or they're worried about intellectual property in a seed that prevents them from using their own selective breeding of crops. You know, there's all sorts of things that the government does that protects those private industries. And so I'd say the fair libertarian response is that the private industry has, to a large extent, captured a lot of everything. And that's through the systems and the protections, quote unquote, that we have.
Sorry, I have some background noise I'm trying to filter out.
No, you're good.
Brother.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of trying to get away from like you know, arguing for the party line and that stuff like that. I feel like partisan politics can be kind of unhealthy, and you got to take a step away from it. But yeah, I mean, I think the government has to be strong and robust in some areas, and then it probably should, you know, be less robust in others. I mean, that's just one of those things that I do think that a weak government could be more susceptible to, you know, like special interest if it's not able to regulate its special interest in any ways. You know what I mean?
I know what you're getting at. I'm just saying that my evidence is that we have 100 years of government doing nothing but growing and becoming more involved. If you can think of any issue where there actually was deregulation, go for it. But there really hasn't been any cases where there's been this massive cut in regulation that's yielded in some catastrophe. And we don't have to go too much farther. We're getting really in the rabbit hole of campaign finance. I appreciate the lively discussion, Tommy. Yeah. I'm not trying to gang up on you because I am more of a policy wonk. I don't look at polls. I'm bad with statistics, brother.
I mean, if you want to talk reforms, I can talk all day. Tangent, that's
fair enough.
It's more optimistic in my head than to, argue about the same things over and over again.
So, the main issues driving this election cycle or driving people to polls is immigration, economic, and, women's rights and the abortion in different states, depending on whatever state you live in. That's a whole thing. I was a part of a whole investigation that looked into the landscape of the country after Roe v. Wade. And it's a lot to, go to different states and just see how everything is fluctuating. I mean, what are your guys' key thoughts on kind of the economy? I know Trump talks a lot. He talks a lot about how things were so much better under him. And, people remember things being better under him. That's what's driving a lot of voters to him. I will be the first to admit, I told Tommy about this. I'm not kind of like super well versed when it comes to economic issues and things like that. So, I mean, it can also kind of get, how do I articulate this? A lot of times he says things were just better under me, but doesn't really highlight specifically that I've seen what he did that the current administration counteract that made it poor for everybody else. Does that make sense?
I think I know what you mean. So you're saying that, there's no tangible things that the Biden administration did that made it worse that you can see. Is that?
No, I mean, from what he says, right? So
from what Trump says.
Yeah, from what Donald Trump says. Under me, we had this, and this, and this. Under them, it's just, chaos. And a lot of it is shifted to immigration.
I wish we had a clip. But I'll speak from the cuff. Okay. I mean, when it comes to immigration and border policy and how it's tied into the economy, I mean, yeah, the United States economy needs workers. We need people who are going to have families and have babies. And I think that ideally it'd be nice if American families had stable homes and we didn't have a lot of single parents and other issues that are kind of cultural. But when it comes to the border policy, Donald Trump did have a remain in Mexico policy that said, if you're trying to claim asylum in the United States and you make it to Mexico, you have to wait there while your asylum court date starts, which could be anywhere from 3 months to 6 months. It probably could be longer, Jazari, I'm guessing. But that was the policy that Trump had. And, I think that there used to be seasonal migration where, Mexican families or Mexican workers would come up through the south of the border to work in the rural areas of the United States. But that was a lot more seasonal. And so they'd come up, they'd move back down. And I think the United States has definitely not facilitated seasonal migration. I think that there probably isn't resources to actually vet everyone and make sure that if you do have skills and you do have a job, if you have a job lined up, I think there should be essentially private immigration where, hey, if you have a farmer sponsor who has some houses on his lot and he wants to pay for some people to come over, I think that it should absolutely be incentivized by the private market. But as far as the economy goes, the economy was essentially better because Donald Trump didn't always clear off as much spending. And what you first felt, the first round of inflation that we felt, was due to the COVID stimulus that he approved. There was follow-on bills that Congress basically just jacked up the federal spending. They printed a bunch of money, and it took a while for us to feel the effects. I mean, is Donald Trump better on immigration? I'd say yes, because we should know who people are. I mean, even Chase Oliver says we should return to Ellis Isle-style immigration, which includes vetting. It includes not just letting people walk across and say you can live here while we vet you and get your appointment. It says, no, you wait, get your appointment, and then come here. And I think that's, Ellis Isle-style immigration, when you put it like that, it sounds like a better policy than just having people flock here, because that journey is extremely taxing. And to say that people have to make it here from Guatemala or Haiti or Ecuador or wherever they're making it from, to say there's no reprieve or there's no chance for them to have a stop and actually try to find a better spot, I think we're setting ourselves up and we're creating bad incentives for the future. And I think Donald Trump probably would reverse that policy. Would he really be any better? Not necessarily, because all he has is instincts. He doesn't have a guiding star. He doesn't have any sort of principle that really dictates what he does. He just has his business instincts, which are like 50-50, and we can debate even that.
I don't have a lot on economics. Immigration. I will say that we do have a broken system, especially when it comes to asylum seekers, because it takes 4 or 5 years for a case to make it through the system or something like that, and meanwhile these asylum seekers just kind of stay in America. Is that right? For the entire time, we just have this huge backlog, and we don't have like enough judges to actually adjudicate these claims in a timely manner. And there's just all kinds of examples like that of why our immigration system is kind of broken. Quite honestly, just seeing how an immigration bill was just tanked in Congress because it was an election cycle, I just kind of think, like, why do you want to fix a problem that is actually quite lucrative for both parties, to be honest? As far as the Remain in Mexico policy, the thing is that didn't even, return 100,000 asylum seekers back to Mexico. It was such a small impact. I mean, I guess I don't really have any strong opinions about it or like that, but it was just a small thing. And when it comes to integration, we didn't actually see any of those reforms that I would like to see happen under Trump. And that's not to say that Biden's been any better about it. You know what I'm saying? And I don't think that this is a problem that's going to be solved in a while, because it's just a very convenient thing. It's also very hard to get this immigration reform. I think a person from a left-leaning or liberal view would say that the Democrats are ready to bend over backwards to, appease the Republicans on a border bill just so they could get it done in an election cycle and say, look, we did something. But then even that wasn't good enough, So I just kind of think the immigration is more of a political football than it is like a serious discussion point. Now, for economics, when it comes to Trump, were we better under him or not? Like, if you want to look at like traditional economic numbers, and you want to discount the pandemic, economy, I mean, I think that's something that nobody could really blame Trump for, is when the numbers did tank. I don't think we're better under either, because you got to get away from those traditional numbers. Like, traditional unemployment rate is not a good measure of how healthy the labor market is, because it doesn't count some very important data points. A better thing to look at is workforce participation rate, which has been on a pretty steep decline ever since I think the 80s or something like that. It's not gotten better under any president since like the 80s or something. So, I mean, by the traditional numbers, things have really rebounded under Biden from the pandemic. However, I don't feel like the average person is feeling that. I feel like there's this term called K-shaped recovery, where normal everyday people aren't feeling this huge economic windfall, but the stock market is at an all-time high. The traditional numbers are back to where they're supposed to be considered healthy economy or something like that, but people are just not feeling that. So, I mean, I don't think we were better under either so far. So that's where I am right now.
Yeah, I mean, moving forward, kind of with what he was talking about as far as like what his economic policies are when he comes back into office. I was watching some videos on his, plans for taxes and things like that. He wants to make his 2017 Tax and Jobs Act a little bit more permanent. And his plan to increase tariffs on everything. But the argument, is that that's just going to be passed on to the consumer, the cost of tariffs. But then we're banking on American companies coming up and making the things that, are being imported from overseas to kind of turn those into American made jobs. Some of the things that, he says, and as far as what his plans are, I don't know. I'm not feeling too great. I'm not feeling too great about it. And like I said, I'm not the best when it comes to specific numbers and things like that. But yeah, so we'll kind of just see what plays out on that, unless anybody else has anything to add.
Not really. No. You can't take Donald Trump. You can't take anything he says like at his word, because I think that even more interesting than the debate of Kamala Harris circa 2020 and circa now, it'd be really interesting to see a Donald Trump 5 minutes ago and Donald Trump 5 minutes in the future. Like, that debate would be back and forth, because he changes his mind so much.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that he has no North Star. It's almost like the Marine Corps mantra is that if we don't know what we're doing, there's no possible way the enemy could. And it would be very interesting to be the fly on the wall, or like really kind of see what's going on inside his brain and his but yeah, he only has his business instincts. I don't think he's never picked up an economics textbook in his life. So he really just kind of relies on the people around him.
What do you think of his VP pick? Do you think that was also kind of just relying on?
I think it was kind of his instincts. I tell you what, after seeing the VP debate, though, I do see why he chose him. I do see why I chose JD. Like, there's a really funny like cheesecake. There's like a funny little like cuddly JD Vance, and there's like straight professional lawyer like JD Vance, it seems. And he impressed me during that VP debate. Honestly, I haven't looked too much. I haven't read his book. The VP's job is to basically stay alive, it's interesting why Kamala Harris also got brought up as being such an accomplished VP, because the VP really doesn't have any job. What did Mike Pence ever do, really? He was sometimes a liaison, but like the VP's job is technically supposed to be nothing.
Yeah, I would say that I think he did do very well in the debate, coming out ahead on that one. But was anything really said on the other side? Like, not a whole lot. But that's the other thing that has been interesting to see with this election cycle. It's almost as if Kamala Harris has kind of absorbed the title of president, or like being responsible for everything that happened under the Biden administration, just because now she's at the top of the ticket, which has been interesting to see, because it also muddies the water on like what people really perceive the vice president to be. They are delegated tasks. Like you said, they're essentially a backup battery in case, the main one fails. And, just represent the U.S. as, an envoy or whatever, whenever needed. But yeah, Tommy, do you have anything to add on that?
JD Vance is good at media. I mean, if you listen to him on like some of those sort of right-leaning podcasts, you'll hear one JD Vance, and if you see him on debate, you hear another one. But he's very good at what he's doing. He knows how to speak to like audiences. So I mean, I can see why he's the pick. I mean, if the reporting is to be believed, you had a lot of people like Elon Musk and even Trump's sons just saying, we want this guy, we want this guy. And he's actually kind of counterintuitive to Trump, because he's like somebody who comes out and says, I want to regulate like tech companies and stuff, which is not something.
Oh,
did we lose him?
He'll probably time back in a second here.
I am back. So anyways, I was just saying he's kind of in some ways he's counterintuitive, because he's for regulating like tech companies. That's something that Trump or Republicans weren't really attracted to. And then he's also like, he supports like sectorial bargaining for labor unions and stuff, which is something I would actually found to be quite surprising. He actually praises, I think it's the head of the FTC, one of the Biden picks or something like that, about how she's been
Lena Khan.
Yeah, there you are. And how she's been aggressive towards like kind of antitrust measures. And that's JD Vance. Like, he has some very things that make, the left-leaning person may go, whoa, what? That sort of things. But he's very good at media training, and he's somewhat counterintuitive. I can tell why he was picked. I mean, I think they also thought a lot of like Peter Thiel money was going to come in with it, but apparently they're a little disappointed with how little Peter Thiel has put into the race. But that's just what I think about JD Vance is
what about Tim Walz?
I mean, I get it too. I mean, I think when it comes to VP picks, like sometimes that's the signal of where the party is headed, or you're at least trying to appease the people who are going to be your more prominent base in a few years. And he's got some pretty strong progressive policies, like free lunch, that sort of thing. He was very strong with labor union reform or something like that. I remember there was this battle between, I think it was cab driver unions versus like Uber or something like that. And even though they had this very small majority in Minnesota, they pushed through all these like really progressive, populist kind of things that people really loved. And I remember like the cabs driver union was just like singing his praises and stuff. But I think that, yeah, he's a good pick for where the party's going. I think that their base is going to be more progressive and more liberal leaning in the future. And I think that's why he was picked. Also, I mean, he's not like devoid of character like, was it Shapiro Shapiro.
Yeah, I thought Josh Shapiro was
Oh,
going to be
man.
the pick.
Very ambitious guy. And reportedly what happened is Josh Shapiro came in and he gave this like feeling of he had all of his plans for his future career in mind. And when Tim Walz went in, Harris was like, what do you want to do as VP? And he was like, well, what do you want me to do as VP? Right. And it's just, he just killed his interview with Harris, because he was just like, you say jump, I say how high. Whereas these other people who are on the short list seem to have like ambitions for their future careers. So, that's why he was a good pick. I'm not frozen, am I?
No, you're not.
Okay, good. Great.
That was, I mean, kind of too what was also reported when he went into these kind of vetting meetings and things. It was trying to be sold as like a 2-for-1. Like he wanted to be like very, very, very involved, What are your thoughts on Tim Walz, Trevor?
I don't feel like he's very likable. I feel like he's too try hard almost in trying to be appealing to men, because that's what it feels like the Kamala Harris campaign is trying to do. As a veteran, I've totally called out his statements on carrying a weapon of war in war, quote unquote. It's just a lie. And I feel like I know that veterans who feel like they have to misrepresent their service are doing that because they either feel like they haven't done enough, or they know they didn't do something, or just some other sort of machismo that you don't really need to bring to the table. And the fact that he has still kind of done it, where he didn't really own that misspeaking at the debate. I just think he's extremely unlikable. I do know somebody in Minnesota, Tommy was talking about his very progressive and kind of populist policies. I do know a libertarian in Minnesota who has nothing good to say about Tim Walz. I believe he probably is a little bit more partisan, so he's probably kind of unfriendly to some of the Republicans up there. I maybe shouldn't say that out of turn, but I don't like Tim Walz, and I'll be as kind with it there.
I mean, he has a pretty good track record of being bipartisan in Congress, but he did kind of change his tune on certain positions when he became like governor of Minnesota. The weapons and war thing, I think that the guy, you change one word and it's basically what I think it was supposed to be. I've carried weapons of war. I've carried weapons in war. Not that big of a deal to me, to be honest.
Italy isn't a deployment. You don't call Italy
yes,
a deployment.
It is.
It's not a deployment.
If you deploy, you deploy. We don't need to do these like purity tests when it comes to service.
It's not a purity test. It's telling the truth. A combat deployment is a deployment. If you go to Kuwait, that's not a deployment.
Did he say it was a combat deployment? I actually don't know that.
He said he deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, I believe.
Which is what he did. Yes.
It's not telling the truth.
I don't think he lied.
Well, again, there's other statements that he's made that does kind of counteract that. I think it speaks to his character.
Tiananmen Square. Something like that. He said something about how he was in Tiananmen
there
Square.
In that summer. Yeah, he said again. It's another misspeak where it's like you can only have so much of those. What are
so
you?
He was there like several months later. What I will say is he's not very good at trying to explain those things away. I remember before they got to those points, which I think were a lot, I guess, better criticisms and relative to each other. Like one of the things they were saying is he was like, "Oh, he got a DUI." He got a DUI.
I'm not bringing that up. Yeah.
No.
People make mistakes. Yeah.
I'm just saying this is kind of a fun little thing. Like he got a DUI in my hometown because he taught at my high school. That's kind of a little claim to fame there.
Did he really?
Yeah. Like he got caught driving under the influence in Nebraska, western Nebraska, and the other part of that story is he never drank a drop again. And it's like when I saw people like criticizing him for that, it's like you got to find something better. And then I guess I guess they did. I think the Tiananmen Square one is like definitely one that's like, okay, I don't know how you messed that one up. I can get in war versus of war and stuff like that, but that one's like I was in Tiananmen Square but then he went like a few months later, was it? Is that right?
It's something like that. He said he was in there during the democracy protests, and in reality, he was there in the aftermath. Yeah. And his attempt to explain it away,
not good.
It wasn't good. And it becomes, this is what I really liked about Gary Johnson. This like screamed to me is that Gary Johnson in 2016 or 2015, when he was first campaigning, he said, I just tell the truth, and then I don't have to worry about what lies I have to recall in order to keep them straight. And like, I love that. If you can't own that, if you can't be honest about your mistakes or like really look back at something like, you know what, I was wrong there. If you can't do that, like that says something that's very substantially lacking. If you can't do that, are you really going to look a lobbyist in the eye and tell him no?
I think that it's just much easier to tell the truth, not because of some kind of moral high ground or anything like that, but because it's just easier to remember. So I do agree with that. It's just like I don't think I'm smarter than everybody, because if I'm going to lie to you, I have to think that I'm smarter than you, that sort of thing. But I mean, you know, when it comes to Tim Walz, he is kind of a VP, and he's sort of a signal, or sorry, he is kind of a ceremonial pick, and he's kind of just a signal to the progressive voters or progressive like youth voters in the Democratic Party that aren't happy with Harris, they aren't happy with Biden, that sort of thing. The thing is I know I just know by listening to him that he doesn't have any plans after this. I think that was one of his biggest appeals.
And it does kind of feel like the VPs in the Democratic Party, like ever since Joe Biden, it feels like the VPs have been kind of a race to the bottom, because Joe Biden was definitely subpar to Obama, and then Joe Biden picks Kamala Harris, who is alive, but I mean, what's her record compared to his in the Senate? Even though I also don't agree with everything he got done in the Senate, he has a record. He'd gotten done a lot more, and Kamala Harris doesn't really have much of a resume. And so it does and now she's selecting Tim Walz, who does kind of have a resume, but yeah, like where is that ambition? Where is any actual kind of will on his end? It feels like a race to the bottom. And it kind of comes down to, I don't want to endorse Donald Trump. I don't want to endorse Kamala. I think the system is absolutely wrong. And in order to get it better, you have to tell them, I'm willing to show up just to hold up my middle finger to you. So if you write in your candidate, if you vote for Chase Oliver, if you vote for Jill Stein, I think that it is most important this election to absolutely oppose the duopoly.
Is Jill Stein a real candidate?
She's been consistent. I mean, I'll at least give her credit for consistently holding positions.
She's not.
Consistently what?
I believe she's been consistent on all her positions, hasn't she? Like the past
like
2 cycles.
Positions, but she's a vapor candidate. The Green Party has pretty much become a shell of what it once was. I mean, they don't even go for local office. The only thing they ever really go for these days is presidential office. And I don't believe that she's a Russia asset. I don't even fully believe that she just
Thank God.
I don't even fully believe that she wants Trump to be the next president, and that's the only reason why she's in it and stuff. But her VP is he said in an interview recently, like, hey, we can deny Michigan for Harris and stuff. And that's just like, okay, when you start to say stuff like that, I feel like that you're not really worried about winning or anything like that. I feel like you're trying to have an impact on the results.
And that's her VP pick. I'm just saying, I believe Jill Stein sincerely holds her values. I do think she got caught with some fraud or something last time. And she had to go to court with it. I think she got sued. Maybe she is there a little bit for the grift, but I do believe that she could sincerely hold her convictions. And even that communist lady, Claudia, I can't remember. Is it? There's a communist who's all Gloria. No, Gloria. I don't know. There's a communist, not in the ballot in Nebraska, but in other states, there's a communist. But if she sincerely holds her values, if that's what you want to vote for, I think that is more worthwhile voting for than Donald Trump or Kamala Harris.
But then, I mean, like, when I say, is she a real candidate, Tommy, you were talking about how she's a vapor candidate. Like, she'll show up, like, what did she do? Run in
every 4 years?
Yeah, every 4 years. And if you look at her, like, whatever social media accounts, because that's how we, like, find out what people are up to these days, it's literally nothing. And then she got caught up in some stuff, had to pay, like, what, $150,000. She was fined for something. But then she pops back up. I watched her on The Breakfast Club.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they asked her, like, do you know how many members of Congress there are in the House? And she's like, what?
Like 500 something.
Yeah. So that's why I'm just like, is she a real person?
435 and actually 438, 3 non-voting from like American Samoa, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Yeah. So, but 435 voting members, 100 in the Senate. So I'm ready to run for president because I know the basics, right? No, I mean, it's just the Green Party, like, they have no investment in like those local races or anything like that. They never try to go for a congressional seat or Senate seat or governor or even state legislature. I think there's like 3 elected Green Party candidates, and the only time you ever hear about Jill Stein is when she comes to run for president. So yeah, I mean, she may be doing the grift. Maybe this makes her money, and then she just likes to go away for 4 years or something like that. But yeah, she's not serious, and there's some evidence to suggest, at least from her VP, that she just wants to see like chaos. She might be an accelerationist. I don't know. It's anybody's guess.
Speaking of that, I mean, kind of to wrap up, what are your guys' thoughts on the state of American democracy? Trevor, you want to go first?
I guess. Yeah. I feel like democracy is ruled by midwits. I feel like we have just constantly gotten worse, and I feel like it's hard to get policy wins. Collecting signatures for Nebraskans for medical marijuana, it's now on the ballot. Hopefully, that's a policy win that we get across the board. And even then, I have issues with the federal government, but like the state of democracy is that we get hung up on single voter issues almost, and then Congress passes these giant 600-page bills that doesn't actually piecemeal fund the government, and another big issue gets brought up and hung over people's heads for the next 3 to 4 months until they vote on the next omnibus. So I think that the state of politics is repetitive and terrible, and it seems like we're on a road paved to hell. And yeah, the only real step is essentially putting the brakes, saying that we need to stop printing money, we need to stop funding the government through these ridiculous spending bills, and start electing people who actually do care a little bit. So that's the goal of the Libertarian Party, is really just get attention to how government has used and abused you and commits waste and fraud every single day. And the only way, I mean, short of shooting your way out of it, is a peaceful just passing bills and saying, hey, let's stop doing this. Let's, allow people to grow cannabis or hemp. Let's stop putting all this intellectual property protections that makes medicine so expensive. That's my feelings. And I think that, the more people who do find their pet issues something that they really care about with policy, the more people who do those little steps in the local community to try to push back against government, I think those are the unsung American heroes that we need more to step up.
I mean, Tommy, I can let you go for after in a second if you want right now, but I'm just thinking more so of the things that have gone down like January 6th, and concerns about that happening in the future. One of the things that I think makes a democracy work is if, say you and I are running for the same office and you beat me, I acknowledge that I lost. I'll come back and try harder next time. But now we're in this state of where if one person loses, specifically Donald Trump, he automatically says that it was stolen. And now we're in a position to where we're now in a situation where a lot of, Trump loyalists are now on election board commissions and things like that in swing states or key battleground states. And, with the effort to try to kind of, refuse to certify elections if, he doesn't emerge victorious in this. And so that's kind of the number one concern is at what point, do we start losing voter trust in the system as in, this is a free and a fair election. And when we start kind of undermining that, that's kind of what I mean by it starting to crumble apart.
Well, I think American democracy it's been as healthy as it has been for the last, I don't know, since the 1970s. It's not great. We're not on life support. It has a huge room for improvement. I do wish when it came to the certification process, it was a much more decentralized thing. I think it's our Secretary of State who certifies it and our governor signs off on it or something like that. And then it goes to Congress for certification. I was like, I don't even think Congress should have to certify an election. I think it should be a lot more decentralized. But as far as democracy goes in the health, it's pretty much where it has been for a long time. It's not great. It needs reform. I mean, we got a lot of money in politics that's pretty much making everything go one way. And we have analysis that proves that most of our legislation is geared towards very wealthy individuals, that sort of thing. So, I mean, whatever your pet issue is, I think you need to put it aside for a moment and say, listen, we got a money problem. We have a representation problem. We have no viable third parties because of how bad first past the post is. We have gerrymandering. I mean, these have been problems before Trump, and they're looking to be problems even after Trump. And that's something that we really got to focus on. It's like when a Democrat gerrymanders, it's not good. When a Republican gerrymanders, it's not good. First past the post is possibly the worst system to elect government. And it's these things are probably boring, yet they're the most important things, in my opinion, when it comes to getting democracy to be healthy again. But I mean, yeah, it could seem bleak right now, but I think we've been with the same problem since the 1970s at least. Yeah, reforms. Let's go reforms. Independent redistricting, campaign finance reform. Term limits can be good, but they can also be bad. So you got to really worry about that sort of thing. But I mean, there's always been potential. That's what we'll always have, at least, I guess.
Well, actually, now that you bring it up, Tommy, I think there is something good about how there is some people at least kind of getting more tight knit in their communities. Like you have Legal Marijuana Now party in Nebraska, and I know the Liberal Party has also tried to start for ballot access. So I think that, not necessarily moving towards a European system where we need to have a parliament and a unity government or something, but I mean, definitely just that people are still organizing. I think that is a good sign. And I do think that people are coalescing around it. The issue has been kind of the discourse. And I think that might also be changing. I appreciate this conversation right here, but I think that the way that people talk about politics has definitely been part of the hindrance and kind of coming together. I think it's shown to fracture us, and it almost feels like there's two segments of America who are living in different realities, and then the people who just don't want to participate in that. So, I mean, the solution to that, probably a little bit more of a discussion, but I think that's kind of the diagnosis. Where that swings, I'm not 100% sure.
How are you guys feeling about November 5th?
Ready?
Like I'll need a long shower afterwards.
I'm ready for it to be over. I'm terrified of the results. In the end, we're still going to have gerrymandering, and in the end, we're still going to have campaign finance problems. The things that keep me up at night, the things that I think we focused on for, if that was our main focus, we'd actually see politicians that actually had the incentives to do what's in our best interest and not who's, not their parties and not who's funding them. But I mean, I could go on and on about that, to be honest. So waiting for it to be over. Probably going to be, I mean, I was blacked out drunk in 2020. I'll be blackout drunk in 2016, probably blackout drunk on 2024. It's the only way to do it,
So I will say, actually, the Lancaster County Libertarian Party is also hosting an election night watch party. We're going to be over at Code Brewing Company. I probably won't be drinking, but, there's great beer there. They make some fantastic ales. We're going to have some chili. So if you want to come by, watch the results come in, donations are welcome, but there's no real charge for it. But we're just hoping to watch the election, see what the initial results in, and probably go to bed at probably around 11 or something. But
I would argue, don't do that. Do what you're supposed to. Sit in a dark room by yourself. Just,
ruminate.
Just pound in Busch Light like a 30-pack.
Mope
by yourself and just
Get
rocking.
furious.
That's the way you got to do it. No, be fearful, be afraid. In a dark room, with just
all clean guns,
your sweatpants and your sweatshirt on, and that's the way it's supposed to be done.
That's not what I do. I sit there in my living room on my computer and my phone, switching between all these newscasts, like looking at the election comes in.
Do you watch the Needle in New York Times?
Probably will this time. I did not last time, but
the Needle, man.
It was so close. I mean, I remember in 2020, literally had my phone on, like still playing while I was lightly sleeping because the results had not come in yet. Because, well, it was too close to call. And I mean, I would just literally just every 30 minutes wake up and just check if there was an update. And I know CNN waived their paywall for their election coverage. So if you had the CNN app, you could literally watch it 24 hours. And I remember Caitlin Collins like falling asleep on the newscast because they were running their anchors like nonstop,
I was a volunteer poll worker, and I got home like 9 p.m. and they had already called Ohio and Florida. And I was like, yep, Trump's getting reelected again. No problem. I'm going to bed. And then I wake up in the morning and the election's still not over. And I'm just like, this is a nightmare. This is a nightmare. I thought we already knew what was going to happen, and I accepted my fate. But then they strung us along until like Saturday. Was it Saturday? It's nuts. Let's not see that happen.
A couple days, yeah.
Hopefully not.
Yeah. I don't know. But the rush of election night, I love it. I love it so much.
No, man. No.
Tommy, do you want to plug VoteWise Nebraska?
Oh, I mean, yeah, we're just kind of a small grassroots organization just trying to take, trying to make the process of voting less difficult, trying to cut through the noise. I mean, everybody's prone to information overload, and so that's what we're kind of trying to address. We just give you the information, tell you what the candidates are saying, tell you what the ballot initiatives are, that sort of thing. But yeah, we just we're doing a pilot program. We just sent out guides to about 1,500 voting addresses or 1,500 voters at an address, but the reach might be 2.5 times as much. Yeah, we're hoping to expand in the future to be able to send these guides to people. I could talk about a whole hour about the whole process, but yeah, if you run into the chair of the Libertarian Party, tell them to say thanks for their enthusiasm, and they did a pretty good job compared to the others.
Yeah.
They understood the assignment.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I am glad to hear that.
Way. Yeah. But yeah, you can check us out.
You mind me asking where to get sent out to?
So we randomly selected voters, but it's voters here in Lincoln.
Okay. I thought you were saying the questionnaire you sent to the Libertarian Party, like the chair.
Oh, just there. Yeah, I actually CC'd everybody who had an email.
Okay. Oh well, no, awesome. Glad to hear it.
I sent an email to like a general account and didn't get anything back, and then I just blasted every email I could find. Nice. And then they were just like, "Oh hell yeah, we'll let you know what we're
We
all
love being
about."
sampled. Yeah, no, I have been an active participant in polls so that more polls will include the Libertarian nominee, and I am finally seeing Chase Oliver on poll samples. So
well, hey,
awesome.
Try to talk to those libertarians. Try to get them in touch with Better Ballots Nebraska. They're the group that tries to advocate for ranked choice voting in Nebraska. And what I would like to see is top 4 legislative candidates in the general election ranked choice voting. You know what I'm saying? Top 2, not as bad. It's not as bad as first past the post, but top 4 with some ranked choice voting. That
would be a great thing for because not every race in Nebraska is nonpartisan, but if you have a nonpartisan race, that'd be the first thing to introduce ranked choice voting with. Okay, it's a nonpartisan race, ranked choice voting.
Yeah, and I'd love to see third parties have a better shot, because then I think that the major parties have to start acting right and actually have to start delivering if they have competition. So there we can agree on some stuff there. But yeah, see if you can get some of the libertarians to try to connect with Better Ballots Nebraska and that's it. See if y'all can help with the ranked choice voting. I mean, I've had a bit of an effort here on local here to Lincoln, talking with some city councilors about trying to put ranked choice voting in for city council races. So yeah, if you ever just want to contact me and help me out with that, it probably looks better if I have more people there talking.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be happy to support it. Yeah.
Yeah. Just reach out to me sometime. But yeah, if anybody's interested, you can go to votenebraska.org. That kind of pretty much just gives you all the details about our program. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we're hoping to make voting easier in the future. So that's all I got.
Definitely need it to be a lot easier. With the information overload, I get like 50,000 text messages a day. I'm seeing ad after ad.
We vote on over 30 offices in Nebraska for things like county engineer, clerk of the district court, treasurer, things that maybe probably taken up our ballot, judicial elections, that sort of thing. And people are prone to information overload, and they just go, you know what? Nah, not going to do it.
Yeah. And I don't know. From my perspective, it's a little bit different just because when I see these ads of people who are running, in the legislature, I think of the interactions that I've had with these people, so I'm just like, when I see, when I see specific people, I'm just like, that's not how you really are. It's like, you are captain, but yeah, so it's always interesting for me to see stuff. And I mean, seeing Osborne's ads, I just think back to the time that I, met him and we were interviewing him for that story and everything. Legislature candidates, seeing them, it's just an interesting perspective, when meeting and speaking with these people, in a news capacity, and then seeing all their political ads on, how they want to be perceived. But yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming on to the live stream. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, like I said, Tommy. Yeah.
Extreme last minute thing. But I'm getting back into live streaming. As you can see, the set is kind of coming together. But yeah. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Any final thoughts?
Let's do another show, but focus on Nebraska next time, because I kind of had all these things about Nebraska races in my head before we got into some of the natural stuff. So yeah,
you could have said it.
I mean, there's just so much to talk about, but I mean, I do like talking about the national politics, especially the Senate, which is, I mean, everything's anyone's guess, but yeah, let's do this another time again.
Yeah,
we could also do it in person this week. I'm putting all this together. So because you guys are both in Lincoln, that would actually be pretty good.
Won't have to subject people to my lo-fi setup here.
Yeah.
As
All
one
right.
as one plug for me, if anybody wants to follow my spicy political takes, I am in Totally Unleashed on Twitter or X at Riley Face, so they can follow me at Riley REILLY Face.
All right. You guys heard that at Riley Face on Twitter and well, X, formerly
Twitter
known as
X.
Twitter.
Oh my gosh.
The
here we
app
go.
formerly known
Ah.
as Twitter.
And check out Tommy's stuff at VoteWise Nebraska. Check out the voter guide to be a better informed voter here in Nebraska. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Be sure to give the stream a like and share. Drop a comment on your thoughts if you're going to be watching it after the broadcast. Truly do appreciate it.